All right, we are now live. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Talking About Survivor. I'm Christiana Ellis, and with me is Mike Mayteen, smiling, a grimace almost, big smile of someone who ran 17 miles today.
Yep, that was long.
Indeed. I, on the other hand, didn't do it today specifically, but just finished moving apartments, which is part of why the posting of the audio of last week's episode didn't happen until today. So sorry about that, everybody, if you were not clear about why that would be, and how could you be clear when I didn't say anything about it. But for future reference, if anyone is wondering about, like, hey, where's the audio? Well, it might just be that I have not gotten around to it yet, but the YouTube version posts as soon as we finish our recording, and so that should always be available as soon as we do the show. And so just in the future, if for whatever reason the audio hasn't shown up yet and you're just dying for your Talking About Survivor fix, that is where you can find it. But tonight, we're going to talk about Survivor San Juan del Sur Episode 9, which is kind of a weird, with last episode, constitutes kind of a weird two-part twist where they set us all up to say, oh, the showdown's going to be Josh and Jeremy, and then Josh gets voted out, and then Jeremy gets voted out.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay.
And one of us suspected that might be the case, and I argued with it, and you were right.
I feel it's funny that you say that, because I actually don't. Did I argue that it was going to be Jeremy?
No, you didn't argue that it would be Jeremy next. You argued that it didn't matter that they were setting it up to look like a showdown, that could just be, I was convinced that was going to be the showdown because of the way it was edited, and you were like, no, they could just be, setting us up. I don't think you intended for this to be set up for this time. I don't think that's what you were predicting, but...
Well, so I definitely, I can't take credit for guessing that it was going to be Jeremy this time. I thought that he was much safer than that. Meaning, potentially a target, but I assumed that he had managed to build a fairly solid alliance. But I guess when it comes down to it, if your solid alliance only has the numbers due to a pair of swing votes, they have the ability to take that back.
Yeah, I was kind of frustrated with this episode. I mean, it was fun to watch, but interesting, and it caught me off guard, so that all the entertainment was there. But I was just starting to think that we were going to settle in and people were going to start playing some decent games.
Yeah.
And while, yes, you can defend this choice and understand it, it doesn't feel like the best move.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I feel a little bit like... I don't know that it was necessarily the best move, but at the same time, I feel like John and Jacqueline did sort of... up their game is not what I mean. They started playing in the big leagues this time. I felt like. Before, I felt like they were kind of keeping their strategy sort of on the periphery. They were trying to keep their options open, and they're not really committing to anything. Whereas I feel like they've charted their course now, and they're moving forward. Now, we could debate whether or not it was the right one, but I feel like they committed this time, and as opposed to just trying to float to the top and go where the wind blows them, which is what they were kind of doing before. So I appreciated that aspect of it, at least, but yeah, I don't know. It is a little bit disconcerting to just a couple of episodes ago feeling like, oh, well, Josh and Jeremy are clearly the two power players here, and potentially even thinking about, maybe if those two get to the end or something, but now they're both gone, so the only fear, I think, is just that is there really anyone left who's going to have a really smart strategic game, or is it just going to be kind of everybody's sort of just flailing and we see who actually makes it to the end?
Yeah. Yeah. Also, the way that whether it was edited this way or just how it kind of all came down, it didn't feel like, John and Jacqueline went into this with the, hey, Jeremy's still like our number one target. He's in our alliance, but if we have an opportunity, we should really look at a way to get rid of him whenever we can. Mm-hmm. It felt like, we accidentally sent him to exile for the right reason, but that means he's going to figure out that I have the idol, and I don't want to tell him. Mm-hmm. So I should probably just vote him out so he doesn't tell anybody.
Yeah, it was kind of it was kind of a panic move, and ultimately he's not going to be effective in that regard because he did tell someone. Jeremy and Natalie talked about it before he got voted out. So, yeah, it's. I think I agree that it was not the only solution to that problem, or rather, they created the situation in which that was the only solution. Like it was previous decisions that put themselves in that spot, as opposed to orchestrating it on purpose.
Right, and I felt like I just thought it was going to go down a different way, especially when John acknowledged that he understood that Jeremy was definitely going to find it. Like he thought through that smartly. Like he's going to get a very specific clue. Mm-hmm. He's not going to be able to find it, and he's going to be mad that we sent him there under the pretense that he could find an idol for the Alliance. Mm-hmm. Only to realize that someone in the Alliance has an idol and hasn't told him. Mm-hmm. So I thought where he was working towards was, all right, I'm gonna have to grab him as soon as he gets back and be like, hey Jeremy, we couldn't get into it prior to you going, so we still had to send you like that. Mm-hmm. The idol wasn't there. I mean, I've got it, and I'm here on this alliance, and we're together. Mm-hmm. I thought that's what he was gonna do. So, because Jeremy would have forgiven him at that point and been like, okay, I understand now why I had to go to exile, mm-hmm. because in the short time frame, we weren't ready. You could understand why John wouldn't have told him up to this point, because it was only the last tribal council that they decided to align with these guys. So he had no reason to tell him up until now. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was what was going to happen. It wasn't what was going to happen. So it ended up getting a little crazy. So.
Yeah, yep. So let's go ahead and jump back to the beginning. We started this episode with John talking about learning from past seasons that he needs to trust his instincts. And although I don't necessarily disagree that you need to trust your instincts because, the problem is that there's not enough objective information to make a decision rationally and on that basis only. Logic and rationality, to some extent it's going to come down to there's a gamble, and what else can you do but trust your instincts? You have to size up a person and decide, well, okay, do I think they're telling me the truth, or do I think they're lying, right? That sort of thing. But at the same time, your instincts are not inherently magical. They're not always right. Some people have better instincts than others, and even sometimes you have good instincts and they can let you down. It's just it's a crapshoot in a lot of ways. But you do it because that's just the nature of the game. Everyone else is in the same boat. But I guess my only feeling was I'm not sure how you learn that from watching. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you watch other people play and then come away with the lesson you need to trust your own instincts?
Yeah.
I mean, is it just a case of you maybe saw some people not trust their own instincts and then have it bite them?
I think that's what he meant. Not that he was learning to develop instincts from watching other people, but that he had seen evidence of, people trusting their instincts and it being the right decision, and people not trusting their instincts and it being the wrong decision. I think that's what he meant. He had seen.
Yeah, I guess
So that made sense to me when I took it that way.
Yeah, well, I guess that makes sense. I don't really honestly know what I'm complaining about. For some reason, when I was saying it just now, it felt weird. But in any case, just like we talked about last time, they couldn't try to really play both sides in the same way anymore after the vote to get Josh out, because there was, it was very clear to everybody what they had done, and you had Josh's former allies mad. Reed in particular is extra pissed. Keith kind of gets a little passive aggressive, where he's sort of, the words he's saying are the good sport words, but you can see in every piece of his body language that he's pissed too. At least that's how I read it.
Yeah, I felt like, Keith said the things that sounded like he was handling it the best. Reed actually did handle it the best. Like, he allowed himself to be pissed off, and then he accepted his situation and tried to figure out a way to move forward.
Yep.
He didn't just mope. So I thought he handled it really well after his initial, well, this sucks, I've lost my alliance, I'm probably next to go, and my loved one is gone that I was having fun playing with.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, too, that I think his whole approach of, first of all, snooping, but then also, throwing Keith and Wes under the bus for the idol. He recognized that, it's like there's no point in holding on to an alliance that now doesn't have the numbers anymore. Like, at this point, there's zero value in that. So that alliance has been broken, and it's every man for himself. And so he turns on Keith and Wes mostly as an attempt to say, keep it from being me this time. So let's just sow chaos, as he says. But I thought that was good, because it kept the issue confused enough that it never solidified on him until and bought time for something else to happen.
Yep.
Let's see. I thought the reward challenge was pretty fun this time. It's a fairly simple, balance beam sort of challenge, but at the same time, in the brain and the mud, just made it extra entertaining.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Because it felt like a new challenge. It feels like both of these were new. They were using elements of things that we know have worked in the past, but they were brand new.
Yeah, I don't recall exactly this configuration of balance board. It's similar to some things they've had, but yeah, I agree. The mud made a big difference in terms of just making it visually interesting and adding just that extra element to it. I mean, like at the point where Reed gets mud in his eye, so it's like just that aspect of it. So I don't know. I wrote down the winner of each round, but I don't know that that's necessarily exciting to recap. There wasn't really, other than Reed getting mud in his eye at one point, and the fact that when Keith went up, he kind of weirdly super calm in the way his body language and his approach, I thought.
Yeah.
which, was impressive. He won.
Yeah, and Baylor beat Missy twice. That was...
Yep. And then including in the tiebreaker.
Yep.
Yeah. So here's a good question. Natalie and Jeremy giving up their spots on the reward to John and Jacqueline. What did you think about that?
I mean, at the time, I thought the same thing that everybody else did. I said, wow, that's pretty genius, give up a couple days worth of comfort, or even just a day worth of comfort for a long-term game playing. Mm-hmm. And then going back and armchairing it, it's like, they clearly didn't, I don't even think it had to do with the fact that, like, the idol thing and all that. Like, clearly they didn't feel like they owed them anything for giving them the reward. Or they would have approached the whole idol thing differently. So, while that may have been the reason that they pushed for Jeremy this time, they clearly didn't feel anything for that. Like, they were thankful, but not enough to not play the game the way they wanted to play the game.
Yeah. Well,
that's probably how most people would be. So, when you look back on a, Thursday morning quarterback, you should definitely not have done that.
Well, see, I feel like it was almost. I don't know that I would go as far as saying like they shouldn't have done it. Anyway, I wouldn't say that I think they shouldn't have done it so much as I think they maybe thought that would do more heavy lifting than it actually did.
Right.
Because I think the reasons that you would do it are still intact and valid. That you're hoping to buy emotional loyalty and that sort of thing, feeling of appreciation. And it's certainly true that there are people who've played the game that are not as good at separating the emotional, social part of the way you would treat people in real life versus the way you play in the game, right? And so I think that there have been players who would feel more of a sense of actual obligation as a result of a gesture like that, right? But in this particular case, it's more John and Jacqueline are a little bit, they're savvy enough at the game to recognize, hey, we can be thankful, but fortunately we did not actually sign any kind of a contract. And we can just do whatever we want. And so I think that it was not necessarily a bad plan, but it was maybe they needed to have done more with that. Or I don't know. I mean, because ultimately it's hard to know if it was even anything that Natalie or Jeremy or any of them did, and whether it was that or if it was really kind of all the result of John realizing, whoops, because we didn't tell Jeremy about our idol, he's really inconvenienced and he's going to know now, so got to get rid of him because he's going to be mad at us. I mean, yeah.
I want to feel like there was something in there that we didn't see because it would have tipped the end, where he also felt like Jeremy was the number one target. It was still the person he always wanted to get out. He knew. I mean, it's almost like he knew Josh and Jeremy were the two that he needed to get out, and he chose on one side because of the way that they mistreated. Like, he always wanted Jeremy out. He only went with him because Josh and his crew upset his girlfriend.
Yeah.
To give him some credit, I hope that happened, and we just didn't see it because it would have just tipped the end if you knew that he was gunning for Jeremy. Like, that's why I said it seemed weird the way it came down. It looked, and maybe that's what kind of sparked it. Was like, oh man, I don't want to deal with this. I wish Jeremy could be gone. Wait, I've always wished Jeremy could be gone. Wait.
Yeah.
maybe I could get Jeremy gone. Let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And,
well, and then
to be
also
fair, 2 other people had to be complicit in this decision.
Yeah.
So 2 other people flipped. It's not just that John and Jacqueline flipped on their alliance. Like, they got their alliance to flip. It's not like they joined Reed and those guys. They flipped within their own alliance, which is also, I think, he needs a little bit of credit for that. So talking it through, I'm starting to feel a little bit better about it, because I don't think the face value of what we saw is truly what John was doing and thinking. So
yeah, I think that there was definitely some, moving pieces in the plan, in the sense that they're trying to keep their options open, but getting rid of Jeremy is, as you just said, it was something that had kind of always been on the agenda, but had been moved to the back burner on the basis that, well, he can help us more than he hurts us right now. But at the point where it started being like, oh, but now instead of being grateful and doing things for us, like letting us get to go on the reward instead of him, now he might be mad, and he might tell everybody about the idol that we have that nobody else knows about right now. So, he just turned himself from a net positive into a net negative. So it's time. But yeah, I agree that I think that they probably had never really stopped feeling like he was a threat that they needed to get out sooner rather than later.
yeah.
So we get a strategy talk between Natalie, Wes, and Keith, which was kind of interesting, just because whenever we actually do hear from Natalie, it seems like she's fairly engaged with the strategic game, and yet we don't see her talk about it that often. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She doesn't seem to get a lot of screen time in the last few episodes.
Probably because she's not the focus. In this one, like, they didn't even talk to her because they knew she was tight with Jeremy, and they didn't need her.
Yeah. So maybe just in some ways she was always kind of, like Reed was to Josh, she was that for Jeremy, kind of the second in command sort of situation. And so now she's going to have to kind of play her own game, whereas she was able to kind of stick with him before.
I mean, I think they're going to try to invite her back and explain to her, because she was also pretty close with Missy.
Yeah.
As was evidenced by the fact that she said, "What the Missy," when she realized what had happened. Which again, to go back to your point about her being engaged, she figured out right away what had happened. Like, she didn't think that John and Jacqueline had somehow, like, flipped back to the other group. Like, she knew that it was her own group that had flipped. I know we can sit here and say, well, yeah, that's fairly obvious, but in the situation, when you're not expecting that and you're hungry and tired and all that, it does take a capacity to be able to parse out who voted for who and what had just happened. And she did. She managed to do that and got kind of pissed about it. But anyway, I think that they'll try to invite her back. I don't know how she'll respond because she was pretty angry. But I feel like they're going to go back to her and say, look, we still wanted to be in the alliance. We just felt like it was time to get rid of Jeremy, and we didn't need your vote, and you were closest to Jeremy, so sorry, but we still would like to play with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as long as she's still on the island, she's a vote that they're going to have to contend with. Not to mention the idea that you never want to completely ostracize someone, because who knows what they'll do.
Well, and even when they're not on the island at this point, they're a vote you have to contend with, because...
Well, yeah, that's true, too.
They are
we got Keith and Wes, or it was mostly Keith saying this. We don't actually get a lot of Wes talking strategy. It's mostly Keith talking strategy on behalf of them both. But Keith has the idol, but basically saying that they're going to have to try to play some kind of a shell game so that people never know whether it might be Keith or it might be Wes that would play it, just to try to use the one idol to protect both of them to the extent that they can. We did get a gem from Wes, though, saying, "I just don't want to get #blindsided."
Yep.
I was pretty entertained by that.
I thought that was great. And, of course, just for good measure, they put the #blindsided.
Well, of course.
On the screen. Even though no one was actually getting blindsided, they still used it just so we remembered it existed.
Yeah. How could we ever forget?
And I think he was just saying it to be funny, and Keith kind of was thinking about it. He was like, actually, that works out pretty well, because if they're not going to blindside us, they will tell us who they're voting for, and then we can give that person the idol. You know?
Yeah.
Which is also part of why you don't try to send people out that way. Because
well, yeah, it's just every time on this show you see someone say, oh, I just want to be honest with them. I don't want to try to. It's like, no. If you just tell someone, that gives them ammo to try to do something about it. Uncertainty is your best weapon.
Right, because they'll either do something about it that will maybe successfully, disable your plan, or they might just start tearing the camp up and shit. That's happened too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're gonna build me off? Well, fuck you. Burn down the camp, throw out all their ice. I'm not gonna be here.
Yep.
So yeah, there's no good reason to tell somebody that, look, we're just gonna be honest with you, it's definitely you.
Mm-hmm.
Like 2 to 3 days before it's time,
Definitely should never do that. That should be Survivor Rule 1.
Yeah.
Now, it's like, but at the same time, this is also where it doesn't pay to get into the nitty-gritty of, like, they call everything a blindside, it seems like sometimes, when in reality I think it's more often something like, well, I think it's going to be me or it's going to be that person and I'm not sure which. That's not a blindside. But, Jeremy was blindsided. He did not seem to have any idea that was going to happen.
Yeah.
So we have Jeremy talking about wanting to get the idol, both just to have for safety, but also specifically so that he can tell his alliance about it and build trust with them, which was kind of funny.
Yeah, it was well constructed how they put this together.
Yeah. So Reed, meanwhile, is annoyed that the opposing alliance is so pleased with themselves. Figures he has nothing to lose at this point. He's right. I think he was almost certainly likely to be the next obvious target with Josh gone. But so this whole bit of him trying to, let's see, I guess it's not till after the challenge that he snoops through the bag, but we just have him talking about needing to find something to keep things chaotic. But it was also, this was the bit, you were kind of saying this, where we have Jeremy not finding the idol and concluding it's probably not here, and that probably means that John has it. And further, that he didn't tell me. And then we also cut back to John and Jacqueline going, they're probably going to give him a really good clue, and it's not going to be there, and he's going to know I have it. We should have planned this better. I kind of liked that acknowledgement. That's one of the things that I think is kind of an interesting bonus to the blood versus water thing, is that when you have two people who really actually can trust each other completely, you know what I mean? Like any two alliance, you can have an alliance of two in Survivor regular, but there's always the risk that, can I really trust this person? Even if they're my closest ally, I do plan to go to the end with them. Can you be completely candid on something like that? I would say normally no. But in a case like this where you have a loved one there, you can.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of an interesting element that the blood versus water adds. So I guess that brings us to the immunity challenge. I liked this. It was not even really a puzzle so much as just you had to build a little shape with the blocks, but doing it with your feet.
Yeah.
I thought that Probst should have said core a few more dozen times. But at the same time, I'm sure he was right that probably it would actually be sort of your stomach muscles that would start getting really tired doing that, I'm sure.
Yep.
Having to keep your legs lifted up and steady like that. Oh, man. That looked really hard.
It looked really hard.
And then, of course, finishing with the flag that you have to lift way over everything else to lower down into the middle without knocking anything over. But so good for Baylor, right?
Yeah, I liked watching her win because she was like so enthusiastic. Like, I mean, and she's actually always pretty enthusiastic, but in this particular one, like, you know, it was fun. You know, she was just so smiley and like happy. I liked it.
Yeah. And it was suspenseful on the element of it being mostly down to her and Reed at the end, just because.
So I'm gonna go turn on another light. So
okay.
So just walking over here.
All right. Well, so just the element of, you know, Reed was our player of the episode who has to win immunity or else he's on the chopping block. You know, that sort of a setup. And of course, he doesn't win this time. So this is the bit where he's talking about, you know, before he didn't have anything to lose, but now he's going to, thankfully just metaphorically, light the camp on fire on his way out. And so actively going and snooping through the bags and Keith's. And it was interesting that, and in hindsight, something that I wouldn't have predicted, but a dumb move on Keith's part of, why did he keep the paper? Like, he wasn't dumb enough to leave the idol in his bag, but he left the clue there that you would only have if he had the idol. Why do you suppose he did that?
I don't know. Maybe he thought it was going to be like a souvenir. Maybe he just forgot. Except he didn't forget because he knew then when it was gone.
Well, and then maybe it was also. I mean, I wonder if he would he seemed mad about people going through his bag, and I wonder if part of that was just this sort of feeling like it really hadn't occurred to him that might happen. You know, because I would think that even on Survivor, it's a little tacky. You know what I mean? The etiquette of the players there is that you have your own bag, and it's, you know, the polite thing would be to not go through other people's bag, and yet you're also playing a game for $1 million where it's not technically against the rules.
So, and they've already done it once this season.
Yeah. So it's, you know, I liked the explicit discussion of John and Jacqueline later when they hear about this, going, it's like, so what did you do with the clues? I burned them, duh. Kind of course I burned them, and it's just like, well, yeah, that's.
That's like what everyone does with them, right?
Right, because it's silly to keep it because it's of no value. But oh well. Anyway, so we do get. Let's see. So Reed found it. He tells Jacqueline and Missy about the idol. Keith figures out that they must know because his bag wasn't left as he left it. You know, so he figures it must be the case. So Jacqueline tells John. At this point, we have Jeremy and Natalie discussing their suspicions about John having the idol, which is interesting just because since John and Jacqueline's whole argument for Jeremy seems to be at least partly on the basis of, oh, he's going to tell other people about our idol. We have to get rid of him before he does that. Well, I mean, he already had told Natalie, so.
And then they told Missy and Baylor.
Mm.
So now everyone in their alliance already knows that he has the idol.
Well, the other element of it may just be that it was less about the secret of it and more about Jeremy was going to be mad about it.
Yeah.
That was maybe the bigger motivation rather than the secret part of it. But so specifically, Jeremy goes over to ask John about it and trying to catch him in a lie. And John, all things considered, given that there's really only one obvious conclusion for Jeremy to come to, John did a pretty good job at making Jeremy leave that conversation still not completely sure. Because, I mean, really, his initial conclusion was not only right on the money, but it really makes no other sense. Like, no other explanation really makes sense. You kind of have to just gaslight him and pretend, well, maybe you just missed it or something. You know? I know you feel like you looked everywhere, but, you know, you did come back looking really tired. You know, maybe you just walked right past it and you just didn't even realize.
I mean, you're right, because it worked because Jeremy was tired.
Mm-hmm.
Also, because it doesn't make any logical sense. Like, Jeremy could have been like, well, where did you look for it?
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, I think it was super lucky in hindsight that the news about Keith's idol came out because it just confused everything. You know what I mean? It's like we know that Keith's idol was not the one that was at Exile. But because we're hearing about another idol in play and nobody's 100% sure where that one came from, maybe that was just enough to make Jeremy feel like I'm not sure enough to publicly accuse you of lying.
Right, and we have a pretty good other target, so I'm going to kind of shelve this for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And see how this plays out. Unfortunately, how it played out for him was getting voted out. But.
Yep. So at this point, we have John and Jacqueline kind of make their decision. They tell Missy about the idol, and it's interesting that the way they spin it to her is that it's about the secret, which is an interesting kind of ingenious way to approach it, I think, because by telling about it, you're sort of reducing its value as an actual secret, but you're also presenting it as this is something we have to keep really safe, secret information, but I'm telling you. You know, there's that aspect of it.
Yep.
I was also impressed with Missy that she did not just completely buy their spiel, you know? Like, she saw the value in being able to get rid of Jeremy, but also saying, I've seen these two steamroll through 3 or 4 people in a row now. You know, going into each vote, pretending that they're playing both sides. So, you know, recognizing that you can't really trust them.
Yep.
But fortunately, I think where Missy was here is realizing I don't have to trust them to be able to work with them to get rid of Jeremy, which is also valuable.
Right, and at that point, probably easier than whatever else she could concoct. Like, you know, now she knows John and so also Jacqueline have an idol. Mm-hmm. Are you really going to go get Jeremy and Natalie to vote for one of them? Is that a good move when Jeremy is still considered a long-term threat?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to go join the other alliance? You and Baylor know that you hate those guys. So for her and Baylor, it was the path of least resistance, honestly. Like, there was the least amount of work to do if they just accepted it.
Yeah. The thing is, though, that I think is maybe nobody has expressed it on the show, I don't think anyone who's not currently in a pair, or I don't know. So John and Jacqueline are a pair that have an idol between them. Keith and Wes are a pair that have an idol between them. And right now at 9 is the last time that the other 5 people could have a majority against those 4. So I don't know that John and Jacqueline are looking to team up with Wes and Keith, but if they did, that would be a pretty tough alliance to beat.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have a mild spoiler for next time that I cannot share with you if you don't want.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, let's avoid the spoiler. Except that what I just said, you bring up knowing a potential spoiler right at that specific context is probably a partial spoiler all by itself. But
it's probably better for me to tell you what the spoiler is, so it's because it's less impactful than what you're probably going to end up imagining.
Okay. So
I was looking to see if it was a new
warning, people.
Next week.
Okay.
And so I was looking at my guide to see, is the episode new on Wednesday, or is Thanksgiving mean they're taking a break?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes they do a clip show.
Right, and so I looked into the description to see, is this a clip show, and it says, chaos at tribal council results in idol being used. And I was like, oh. So, like I said, it's less important than like what you were saying. Like, it's not like, oh man, Josh and John and Wes team up. But I brought it up at that point because you referred to the 2 groups that have the idol. Mm-hmm. Somebody's going to feel unsafe next week. So that could be nothing. It could just be Keith because everybody knows he has the idol and they're trying to get rid of him.
Yeah.
And we also know that there was some, from the scenes from next time, there's some people kind of gunning for John. So. Well,
and honestly, they should be. I mean, at this point, I think you and I can agree that anyone who is not John and Jacqueline, who is not thinking John and Jacqueline are the next biggest threat, is fooling themselves.
Oh, yeah. So, but it is indeed a new episode.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. I liked just getting ready to go into the tribal council. Not that it's some super original, never been said before analogy, but Missy's use of, if we rock the boat too hard, one of us is going to fall out, I thought was very apt to the situation that they're in. Just recognizing that there's a couple of different ways we could go here, but if it seems like the wind is blowing predominantly in one direction right now, then let's... I just realized my microphone was very far away from me. But...
I hear you fine.
Okay. So I think I lost my train of thought now. Oh, just the idea that if you've got a path forward that requires little resistance and results in somebody else being voted out, maybe don't make too much of a fuss just to get it to be some other person who's not you, because your efforts might just make it end up being you.
Right.
So I just thought it was an apt analogy there.
Yeah, that's good.
So we got Josh as our first jury member there at the tribal council. There wasn't anything super notable there, but I continue to just think that he's going to be a fun jury member going forward. I just imagine reaction shots to things.
And he gave us one on this.
Yeah.
I mean, he and Natalie are close to being tied for their reactions.
Yeah. Well, and also what just made me laugh is thinking about Josh and Jeremy being the first 2 at Ponderosa. And just them kind of looking to each other and saying, "What happened? I mean, we were...
What was...
This is not how it was supposed to go." So, let's see. We got more of the stuff with Jacqueline talking about how Wes and Keith don't talk strategy with her, and Keith got very defensive about not talking to the girls, and I don't know if this was your take on it, but the take that I got from his body language was very much, I recognize that now that you've pointed that out, that you're almost certainly right, but I don't like what that says about me, so I'm going to vigorously defend that that's not what happened.
Yeah.
That's definitely what I got from the way.
I got the same thing, yeah.
Yeah. So Reed, meanwhile, is very happy to have other people fighting with each other. Even still, he was definitely at risk, because if not for the plan for Jeremy, it was going to be either Keith or Reed, right? And Keith didn't play his idol, although at some point you can't help but wonder, like, what did he think was going to happen? Because he was one of the votes for Reed. It's not like he was in on this plan to get rid of Jeremy.
That's what I think he planned on doing.
Mm-hmm.
Was to vote with Reed to stack the votes, because I think he thought they would try to split them.
Oh, right. That it was going to be split between Keith and Reed, and so if he votes for Reed, then yeah. So I agree that was the plan, but I guess my point was he was sure enough about that he didn't play his idol. Which, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a gamble, right? Because it's always a situation with you don't want to play it and have it turn out to not have been necessary. But it's, you balance that against getting voted out when you still had it.
Yeah. Or, I mean, because you can think about it, it's not only not playing it when it's necessary, but in the situation they were in, and maybe he thought through this, maybe he didn't, is getting rid of Reed. Yes, I know you always want to stay one more week, so I get that. But if everybody's trying to vote for you, and all you do is use it to get another person who is with you off, and you're still facing the team of 5,
yeah,
it's actually even more. He might have thought it would be even harder to infiltrate without Reed, even though it's actually easier because there's more chance that they start flipping on each other as the numbers of the other team start to dwindle. So you should always try to stick around a week. So I'm not saying if that's what he thought through that would be the right decision, but I could understand that being a reasoning. I feel pretty strong about if me and Wes both vote for Reed, that'll be enough to carry this. And he probably trusted what they were telling him that they were going to, or maybe they all told him they were going to vote for Reed. I don't know, but he seemed pretty sure.
Well, so here's a question. Why was there ever talk of splitting the votes between Keith and Reed rather than Keith and Wes?
Because Reed's the threat.
I guess. Maybe that's it, but at the same time, why not then just vote for Reed?
In case Keith gives him the idol.
Okay. I suppose so. I feel like I don't think that Keith would have ever given Reed the idol. He was mad.
But would you, when you've got 5-3 or 4, I guess it's 4.
Yeah. See, I just feel like if you split your votes between Keith and Wes.
I'm not as positive with what I said now before, because splitting the votes would have been dumb unless they went to Keith and said, "We're splitting the votes." Why would he tell him that? I don't know what happened.
Yeah, because my thinking was if you split the votes between Wes and Keith, one of them goes home and the idol gets flushed.
Maybe.
There's no way they don't play it if the choice is between one of them, because what they would definitely do is hope. Or I don't even know what there would be anything they could do at that point. It would just come down to, well, which of them are they going to save, right?
Maybe what they went to Keith and said is that it's definitely Reed.
Mm-hmm.
And so he voted with them on the chance that, just not to be difficult, on the chance that helps him make some headway at a later date.
Mm-hmm.
So, because we see that a lot when the minority knows they've lost, and so some of them vote with the majority because they figured it out or they've been told, and they feel like, wow, if they're trusting with who they're going to be going with, and if I vote with them, then maybe I earn some trust. Maybe that's what he thought. That actually probably makes the most sense.
Yeah. Because it definitely, I guess I just never understood why splitting the vote. But see, except that I guess that really was.
Splitting the vote wouldn't make any sense, because if they were like, Keith, we're splitting the votes, then he would have been like, all right, then if all of us just vote for one of you, you don't have enough votes anymore. Like, splitting the vote when you're only 5 doesn't make any sense.
So the thing is that what they thought it was Natalie and Jeremy, Missy and Baylor, John and Jacqueline, 6 against 4. Well,
yes, if we split the votes, 4 can beat 3.
Oh, they probably thought they had Alec too, so it would actually be 7-3. We never hear anything from Alec. He never says anything anymore.
Except,
not last couple of episodes.
I mean, he's kind of shut up. Like, the only thing we saw from him was like bullying Baylor, and then he got called out on that, and so he probably doesn't do that anymore.
Yeah. Who did Alec vote for? Let's see. He voted for Reed. So there were 3 total votes for Reed, and it was Alec, Keith, and Wes. So maybe I feel like the plan to vote, split the vote between Keith and Reed could only, like, that plan only would have made any sense if they were counting on Keith and Wes both voting for Reed. You know what I mean? Like, that whole plan only works if you have confidence that Wes and Keith and Reed and Alec would not vote together.
Yeah. And Jeremy and Natalie both voted for Keith. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know.
There's some weird play going on there. But anyway, I was really surprised when Jeremy went. I mean, it's easy to sort of recognize that in hindsight. I guess I just didn't quite believe that John and Jacqueline were really going to vote out Jeremy for that reason. Further, that they didn't even. It's one thing if they were going to flip back over to be with Wes and Keith and Reed and Alec and them again, but that's not even what they did. You know what I mean? It's like... Yeah,
they took the same alliance and flipped it on one of their own.
Yeah, so anyway, you're right. We got a great look from Josh on the jury, and then the what the blank, Missy, from Natalie was pretty good. My thoughts as Jeremy left was just like, those are the risks of being seen as a power player too soon, I guess. We have Josh and Jeremy as the obvious ones, and then they get voted out.
Yep.
I have a note here too, is that Natalie was told by Jeremy, though, that so this was just me again noting that protecting the secret wasn't effective if that had been part of the reason, because Natalie would also know, and if anything, this would pretty much confirm it. You know what I mean? Like, if you were suspicious, like, well, is he being honest with us, and we're not sure, having them turn on you and vote one of you out is pretty much a guarantee that, no, they were probably not being honest with us. So next time, Natalie wants revenge, and John is public enemy number 1, according to the narrator of the preview.
Yep. And Jeremy said that Survivor lost one of the good guys, or whatever.
Yeah, I liked him. I think this has not been a super strong season strategically. Like, there's interesting stuff happening, but we're not having any real standout genius level players here.
No, which is why Jeremy and Josh stood out against everybody else so much.
Yeah. Well, and we could argue that I guess they stood out too much. They were seen as an obvious threat by comparison to all the other players. So I guess that's there can be an element of the the tallest blade of grass aspect of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be too obvious as the leader of the pack. Certainly not until you're closing in on the end game, which we're starting to get close to that now. But it's when you're talking about if only just started the jury. But at the same time, what I think is interesting about the remainder of the season is that because we have no puppet masters remaining, it could go anywhere.
It really can.
There are some times where you get a run of episodes that are kind of boring because you have some real dominant, tight alliance and they just pick off their opposition one by one. But I don't see that happening this time. Because there's really no strong alliances at all, so we'll see. So, any other final thoughts to wrap up this episode?
Nope.
All right, me neither. So, thank you everybody for watching and or listening. I'll try to get the audio episode up more promptly this week. I'm not moving apartments again this week, so hopefully it'll be a little easier for me to manage. But in the meantime, have fun, everybody. That's a new catchphrase or something. Paired with the wave.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
Yay, happy Thanksgiving. All right. Talk to you guys later. I am going to keep saying goodbye phrases until I just click stop, which I'm doing right